Hey everybody, welcome back. Thank you for joining me on this Thursday episode of the Daily Prompt. In the very first episode, I talked about how the idea in your head is and will always be an idea in your head. And it's funny because when I set out to do this Daily Prompt series, I had a very clear idea in my head of what that was going to be. And then as I started rolling out the episodes, I realized that the comments are actually so helpful and so valuable in shaping and shifting and refining some of the message and some of the content that it's actually, I haven't changed what the Daily Prompt is or what it's about or its intention or where I'm going or my commitment to it or any of that, but it has made me want to change some of the episode planning that I had in my early idea for it. So this, coming back to that lesson from before, is important to remember that as soon as you put your idea out there and it meets with reality, it's going to change. So the reason I say that is because what I originally had planned for today's episode, which was originally going to be yesterday's episode, has changed again. Reading through the comments and sort of getting a sense of what people are interested in, I'm realizing that you want to get straight to the brass tacks more quickly. I really wanted to establish a lot of context. One of the biggest challenges that I face is that I don't know what you've seen of mine. I have a mountain of content out there, and literally to understand every little thing that I'm doing within the context of all of that makes this a pretty cool thing. If you don't understand any of that, if this is the very first time you're seeing me, you have no context for all that. So you're only judging what you're seeing based upon the words that are coming out of my mouth right now. So of course, yes, I talk too much. Yes, give a time code to cut to the chase of what the simplistic takeaway from a video is, and strip it of all of its context. Like, at the end of the day, I wanted to make a bunch of videos at the beginning that would establish the context so that you could watch all the rest of the series kind of with the context in mind. It would give it all that additional layer of meaning and purpose. The challenge is, well, the reality is that I've come to immediately realize is that nobody is going to watch this from beginning to end. Well, if you do, you'll be binging it, and as you know, what I say about binging, it's fun in the moment, but you don't retain that stuff. So it's more important for you to take ongoing, consistent daily action. So as this series unfolds, I'm probably going to end up repeating a lot of points. I'm probably going to end up going down some similar thematic roads again and again, simply because those are the essences that you need to understand and extract to be able to actually apply what you've set out to do. But I've realized that taking the time to establish the context, it's the wrong way of thinking about what this series is actually all about. So what I want to do in this episode is jump kind of headlong into it and give you pretty much the creative process in overview. Now, to keep in mind, to understand this with a little bit more context, I reverse engineered the creative process when I couldn't find material to produce. People had great ideas. They would create screenplays that I couldn't use. And so I thought, how do I get writers all the way from the idea to not just a screenplay, but a screenplay I can actually say yes to? Reverse engineering that process led me to build this system called Fast Screenplay. Fast Screenplay is built upon the process itself. So whether you join me in Fast Screenplay or not is secondary. What you need to understand, and the takeaway that I want you to have from this video, is that there is a process. It's relatively simple, but to actually master the different movements of it are going to take a lot of time. So as you can see, I still have the cough, it hasn't gone away. So here's basically how it works. If we think about reverse engineering the process, the creative process, let's say that as an independent producer, I want to find a screenplay that I can say yes to. You as a writer are starting out with an idea that you want the producer to say yes to. In theory, from your point of view, all we need to do is connect, match up, and you could pitch me your idea and I could say yes, and away we go. But that's not really how it works, because I need a final product that actually includes a lot of the things that I need in that final product, right? So it's not in my time best interest to hear the pitches or to hear the ideas that have not yet been fully realized. So what you have to do is go through that process. So let's talk about that process. At the very beginning, you have to take that idea and you have to turn it into a story. It's the story development phase of the process, right? Everyone has to do that, whether you're writing a Hollywood blockbuster or an independent art house film or some experimental thing or a quirky Australian indie film, whatever it might be. Everyone has to go from idea to the story. Everyone then has to take that story and get it onto the page. They have to write a draft, right? They have to get it out of them. Everyone then has to take that draft and refine it so that it represents what they were trying to achieve. You can't just, most new writers sit down, they have an idea, they get some formatting software, and they sit down there and start blasting out some pages. And then at the end of it, they go, well, it looks like a screenplay, and they send it out. Believe it or not, yes, they do. I've been on the receiving end of thousands of submissions like that. That's not going to work because it doesn't include dramatic storytelling. It doesn't include all the writer tools and skills you need. It doesn't include what the producer needs from your project. You need to actually go through. So when you have the idea in your head and you put that idea onto the page, it never comes out fully formed. It just doesn't come out perfectly because your mind is a mishmash of swimming ideas, as you can see by me having this conversation with you now. There's lots of ideas, and as soon as I pop something out there, I go, oh, and I need this piece to give you context. And so that's what happens in your first draft. You basically take that idea and you spill it out onto the page, and it's kind of a mess. But when someone reads your screenplay, it's not just about them reading words on a page. It's about them understanding the movie that you see in your head, the story that you're imagining. That's what has to come out of the pages. So in order to make that happen, we rewrite, we revise, we look at what it is, we see where it's hitting, where it's missing, and then we go back through and we revise that draft. So we end up with a second draft, third draft, 10th draft, 100th draft, where each draft is getting us closer to what it is we're actually trying to put out there, right? So that process, again, story development, writing, rewriting, and then comes the polishing, where once you have the story that you want to tell, then it's about refining the words on the page so that when someone reads those words, they're going to experience the story in the way that you imagine it in your own imagination. See what I'm saying? So screenwriting ultimately is cinema on the page. Or when we read a screenplay, we need to be able to see the movie in our own imagination. We, the reader. Now, I know you, the writer, see it. And you, the writer, can put it on the page. But if we, the reader, can't see what you're seeing, if we're confused by your writing, or if the characters go in directions we don't understand why they're doing that, then the movie that you're seeing and the movie that we're seeing from the script that you wrote are going to be two different things, right? So that's where we go into the next process, which is what I call the alignment phase. So let's break it down, because this idea of a fast screenplay, people often think a fast screenplay is a screenplay you write really quickly. FAST is an acronym: focus, apply, strengthen, tweak. You focus your idea into a story. You do the story development phase. Then you apply that to the page. You write your first draft. Then you rewrite. You strengthen your story until it's solid, until it's what you want it to be. And then you tweak, you refine, you polish until the screenplay that you have at the end is exactly the movie idea you saw in your head and gives the reader who reads it that experience. Now, here's the thing. If you write something, if you have an idea, you turn it into a screenplay, and you send it to me, and because you think it's something that's going to be perfect for me, and I'm looking for stuff, and so you send it to me, and I read it, I go, can't use this. All that work that you've just done is, if you're trying to write for me, then this is just a hypothetical example. If you're trying to write for me, all that work is for naught. If you're, let's use somebody else. Let's say Steven Spielberg or somebody, right? You want to write a story for him. So you write it in a way that you think it's going to, and then you get it in his hands. Let's assume you can for a second. You get it in his hands, and he reads and goes, yeah, this is really not for me. It's like, what do you mean? I wrote this for you, right? So one of the things I realized along the way, as someone on the receiving end, as the producer looking for material to produce, excuse me, I really apologize for the coughing, is that the only way you will ever sell a screenplay is if you create something that is in sync with a producer's immediate needs. So if you write something that I go, I love this story, couldn't possibly make it, then it's not aligned with me, right? If you write a horror film And I'm happy for people to write horror films. Got no problem with horror films. I'm just never going to make one. So if you write a horror film, no point sending it to me. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be friends. That just means we're not in sync on that project. So ultimately, as part of your process, you need to have what I call an alignment phase, which is where you send your work out for notes and feedback, and you understand how people are seeing and interpreting what you've created. By understanding that, by developing that particular skill, you'll then be able to refine and adapt your project to make sure that it lands with your target producer the way you want it to land with your target producer. Then the next step is figuring out who your target producer is and reaching out and connecting with them, where there's a specific strategy about how you connect to them, which we'll talk about as we go along. Now, the way that I realize this, the writing process itself then has the 4 parts: focus your idea into a story, apply it to the page, strengthen that work until it's solid, tweak until it's refined, so it's a page turner. So when they pick it up, they can't put it down and they see the movie you see in your head. That's the writing process. Making sure that it lands with the appropriate person the appropriate way is this process of alignment, right? So that's sort of your writing process. It doesn't matter what you're writing. It doesn't matter if you're writing a horror film. It doesn't matter if you're writing a sci-fi film. It doesn't matter if you're writing something I would love or something I would hate, but some other producer would love. At the end of the day, everyone has to go through those stages. Right? Now, so what I did when I started reverse engineering this process is I realized, well, so then when you're done with it, you still need to be able to connect with the producer. So I added a phase at the end called the payoff phase, where writers go, there's a specific strategy that we use, the storytelling skills that we build along the way to connect with producers and production companies. And then I thought, well, if you have that, what's the difference between a novice screenwriter and a professional screenwriter? The professional screenwriter has experience, and because they have experience, they have a better sense of what the industry needs. They have a better sense of what a producer might want or might be interested in, and so that colors the way they go through this whole process, right? So someone who has experience as a professional screenwriter has already been through the process, probably many times, and they bring that knowledge with them through the process. So what I did in my system was I created what I call the setup phase, and the setup phase is where we prepare your imagination so that we give you the context and the framework so that you can go through this process as if you had a certain base level knowledge and skill and process. Once you've been through the process, now you have this whole process to go through it again with all this additional knowledge and information. So each time you go through, you get better and better. Now, again, I'm not trying to do the hard pitch on Fast Screenplay. What I'm trying to help you understand is that this process is the same for every writer everywhere. This process will always be this way. You will always, if you're a novice writer or a beginning writer or intermediate writer that's been struggling along the way, the reason for that is simply that you haven't been all the way through the process. Maybe you've skipped parts of the process, or you've been through the process and you're not now applying what you know, or you don't yet have the means to know how to apply what you know to the process itself. So within this process, people who teach screenwriting, the 3-act structure or intermovie method or all these, like all that kind of stuff, the people who teach that stuff is all great. That all goes into the story development phase. That's it. That's one part of the process. Learning characters and dialogue and all this stuff, which we will talk about, and I will teach you a lot of this stuff on this series. That's one part of the process. Refining it, you're going to use that stuff during the refining stage, but that's not necessarily going to help you go connect with a producer. That's not necessarily going to help you understand feedback and how to adapt and align your project to feedback, right? So let's bring this back. How long have I gone? Okay, it's not too bad. The reason I want to give you this framework, and today's prompt is going to be relatively simple. Today's prompt is, now that I've explained this sort of 7-step process, when you look at the idea that you have, when you look at your reason for the idea, when you're driven by the passion, when you think about actually making that real, are you yet, probably not, and it's okay because you just watched this video for the first time, are you yet using those 7 steps of the process to map out how you're going to get there. Because if you think, for example, I want to, go do this screenwriting class because they teach a simple formula for turning my idea into a story, that's all well and good. If you want to do that, drop that into the story development phase. But you still need to understand how to get through the whole process, right? And here's the reason why. Because as a producer on the receiving end, or a would-be producer, we'll talk about that next week. At some point, I want to talk about my IMDb page, which sucks, admittedly, at the time of this video. But if you're looking at it from the vantage point of somebody searching for material to produce, the reality is just because you can turn your ideas into a properly formatted 115 page screenplay doesn't mean that it's something a producer can use. And the reality is that a lot of writers, most writers, I would say, based on submissions that I received over the years, most writers don't understand that. Most writers don't understand that there's a difference between getting a screenplay on the page and creating a screenplay that's actually production ready and that's actually viable that a producer can say yes to. My goal with this series, with building the independent film studio, with Fast Screenplay, with all of it, is to help you get there, right? Is to help you understand those things that are not incorporated within just the storytelling stuff. It's very easy for particularly screenwriters to just go swimming in the story stuff because it's fun. You're creating characters, you're creating situations and scenes, and how cool to have a big explosion over here, whatever you're thinking about. But if nobody can use that stuff, ultimately you're writing for your bookshelf. And when there are producers out there, and there are more and more and more for reasons I'm probably going to talk about tomorrow, because I'm changing the order of how I was going to give this information out. What I'm probably going to talk about tomorrow is this enormous opportunity that's available to us out there. There are more and more and more producers out there producing more and more and more content that cannot connect with an audience because it's not strong enough. So we need writers to write at a higher caliber. If you want to break into Hollywood, or you want to break into the film industry of your country, and you want to go sort of the traditional road, you still have to master these skills. You can take advantage of all the opportunity to master these skills. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to try and pull this back, rein this in a little bit, and sort of let me crystallize. So ultimately, every single one of us who has an idea in our head and wants to turn it into a screenplay that actually gets turned into a movie has to go through this process. It's the same for all of us. If you don't agree, pop in the comments why you don't think so, because I have had a lot of disagreements over many, many years, and no one has yet told me how they can circumvent this process. Or actually getting the film made would circumvent. Maybe you can, because you know Spielberg, and you can go pitch him and he goes, I love it, here's a check, and he's going to give it to somebody who goes through this process, right? So at the end of the day, this process is the same for everyone, and it's important for you to understand that, because it's going to change the way you approach the creative process. So today's daily prompt is to look at what you've done so far this week. Look at the idea, think about the reality of it, think about the reality of it, and think about what are the 7 steps that I've just mapped out for you that you have to go through to get to it. If you have any questions about any one of those steps, pop them in the comments, because I'm going to talk a lot about what's in each of those steps. I'm going to talk about techniques within each of those steps. I'm going to talk about what this means for creativity in general, what this means for the AI writing partner idea, what this means for how it all fits together. I want to do that, and I want to do that interactively with you as we go along. So, hopefully that was okay. Hopefully my early cough in this thing did not distract you too much. My apologies for that. I'm trying to get better. You know how these things work. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate the comments. And by the way, there have been some negative comments. Absolutely fine. I like negative comments. Negative comments help me see where what I'm presenting is maybe misaligned with at least some of the audience. And usually when people don't, there's a lot of people watching that are not commenting. So if you're watching and not commenting and not liking the thing, then it's entirely possible that you think what those negative comments are, but you're not saying it because you don't want to put that idea out there. I welcome negative comments, so it helps me see how to adapt and refine. I'm going to get to my goal. So if you offer me a negative comment, all you help me do is see the thing that I might be missing. Make sense? It's all good. I appreciate the love. I appreciate the hate. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you commenting, liking, subscribing, sharing, all that stuff. And most importantly of all, I appreciate the fact that when you're done with this video, you're not just going to go off and do something else. You're going to physically take action today for 10 minutes at least, an hour or two ideally, 10 hours if you can afford it, but some action to keep moving forward to your goal, because we're going to get you there. But you have to take the action too. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.